I'm going to preach today the message. Isaiah 38 verses 1 through 6, and also Psalm 62 verse 8. It says, when you pour out your heart in front of God to pray, it means to take out all of your sin. Those who take in their sins and hold it, it doesn't go well, or they don't live, and their families come to ruin. And so when we look at Isaiah chapter 38, verses 1 through 6, look at King Hezekiah. And he supplicated to God and he got the answer. Isaiah the prophet went to him and he received the revelation and instructions from God. And Isaiah the prophet, the King Hezekiah was so happy to see the prophet. Oh, welcome, come here. And he said, I have something to say to you. What is that? And God said that you were going to die. And so set your house in order. And you have to get ready to leave and die. And so this is just came out of nowhere. And he was so shocked. And all of his kingly robes and crowns, he just took that off. And he went to the room, his own private room, and he just crying and weeping and rubbing his face in the wall and his body. And look at how his face would hurt. And it said that he wept bitterly, if we look at the Bible. And he cried with tears, God, I was upright in front of you. I was faithful, wasn't I? You saw that. And please see that and extend my life. And so, when we look at, it is like a cancer, if we look at it today's terms. And going to normal doctors and so forth. And he would have tried many things. But it just didn't get well. And it's just the cancer is getting deeper. And in that case, hey, the prophet came, and the front is just so dark. And he wept so bitterly in that moment, more than his whole life. More than his whole life, he prayed more. Just in those few moments, he just prayed the most. And most sincere, most fervently. And Isaiah the prophet, he told him that he was going to die, and he was ready to leave, and he turned around in the palace, and he was going outside the courts of the palace, and God said, Isaiah the prophet, hey, go back and tell King Hezekiah that I'm going to extend your life 15 years, and tell him that. And so, in man's thoughts, God's going back and forth. He said this, he said he was going to die, and he proclaimed that. But then he came out, and he was just right about to come out of the palace, and he went backwards again, and he said, I'm going to extend your life 15 times. And it looked like he was just going back and forth. And when we look at the Bible, and King Hezekiah became king at 25 years old. And he ruled for 29 years in Jerusalem. And those who are good in math, hey, we know 15 years, add 15 years. And so, how old was Hezekiah? He was 39 years old when he was proclaimed that he was going to be dying. And he was a young man, his life ahead of him, but to die at that age, I mean, it's just so dark in his path at that time. And he was extended 15 years. And he died at age 54. He was supposed to die at 39, but he extended 15 years, and he died at 54. And so we can do the calculations at that time, and he died at age 54. And we can see this in Second Chronicles 29 verse 1, and also 2 Kings 18:1 and the following. And we can see that his life was extended 15 years. And so it says that he was going to die after his 14th year of reign, but it was added 15 years. So he ruled 29 years altogether. His whole body was just aching, and pus was coming out of him, and he was hurting. And he would have meetings in the morning, and he would say, oh, because it would hurt so much. And so look at the prayer in Psalm 62 verse 8. It says to pray with pouring out your heart. And God saw that. And he sent Isaiah the prophet. And he took the fig trees. And we can see it's a time to take the fruit of the fig trees. When not only just Israel, but it's all just fig trees in Israel. We have them in our church as well. And he said, if you cook that and eat it, then you will be healed. And how thankful that it is. In man's thought, it doesn't. There are a lot of doctors, there's a lot of scholars, and there's good medicine. But look at that little measly fig tree, and just boiling it and just eating it. It seems so measly. But Isaiah the prophet prophesied that. And so he ate that, and he rubbed it on, and he got healed. And so those believers in Japan, they made a medicine with fig trees, the fruit. And I saw that 3 years ago that they came out with that. My beloved believers. In 2 Kings 27, and in Isaiah 38:22, it says this exactly and precisely. Isaiah 38:21 and 22. And he applied it to the boils, and he got extended 15 years. And we can see that he was in suffering because of the nation of Assyria as he was reigning for 14 years. And so look at also Hezekiah's father in that time. How much did he hurt the heart of God. And God said, until you pass on, the Assyrians will not, I will make it so that they will not come in, and I will protect you. And he received that promise if you read the main passage. And look at King Hezekiah. In his heart he made a determination, made up his mind. And he made a decision. And he had assurance. And he just made a determination. To what? For 15 years, I've received that extended life. I'm going to be a person of prayer, he said. And so in his reign, in his palace, all of the people, Hezekiah, the king, never sinned to cease to pray for his people. A prayer that pours out the heart is the pathway to life and blessings. And Hezekiah knew that. That is our title. A prayer that pours out the heart is the pathway to blessings and life. That's the title for today. And Hezekiah knew that. The king Ahaz was Hezekiah's father. And from that generation, when we see the nation, you can't even find God anywhere. And he was so wicked. The king Hezekiah's father was so wicked. And if he doesn't find anything that he likes, he just kills all the people. And if they didn't agree with him, there's a nation of Assyria. And they took all of the treasures from the church and they offered it up. Offered it up. And the high priests were against that, but he killed them. There's no place to worship. There's no feast. There's no... Through Moses, you have to keep the light on forever. It is the eternal flame. God commanded Moses to do that. Keep the lights lit. And even if the people don't come to the sanctuary, the lights are continually on. This is the olive tree, and it doesn't burn very well. It smokes. And so they just close down the doors because the people might come. And they sent the high priest, and they built temples for altars in other places, like in different sub-cities in their hometowns. They made altars where they served idols and spirits. And God sent the Old Testament prophets, but they didn't listen at all. And there's Molech. And what is the god of Molech? They have to get the firstborn child, and they have to offer that baby up, and they kill those childs. And they serve those Molech god. And even the king of Assyria offered his own. And so we can see there's no heart of God in the people. And he ruled in this way for 16 years. King Hezekiah's dad did. The whole nation was in chaos. The people were just depraved. And business was not working. And they would not produce crop because God cursed the land. And so there are a lot of robbers and thieves and bandits. Even there were male prostitutes, women prostitutes. And male prostitutes selling their bodies is a grave sin. And so they did all of those things. And if they desired those kind of things, they could just go to prostitutes. And they could see the male and female prostitutes. They just totally tore away God's commandment. And when we look at the Bible, it was just so wicked. That's how he was. You have to look at the Bible to know this. And after the fall of Adam, there was no king like this. He just was totally against, or just disregarded God and His word. And for King Hezekiah reigned for 29 years, and he had the understanding and discernment, and he had the reformation in spirituality and life of faith, the Passover, and also the Feast of Booths and the Feast of Weeks. They were not kept before, but on the 16th year, he reestablished those feasts. And all of those things, and all of those altars in the temple in Jerusalem, he just took them down and put them in the Kidron Valley. And he just made them into powder and put it into the brook. And the whole nation came into reformation. And all of the people who were in the reign of Ahab was cut off, but only those who who had faith and believed in God. And so he had proper high priests. And so we can see that the Bible was complimenting King Hezekiah, and the king that believed and trusted in God's word was King Hezekiah. Second Chronicles 18:5. And so they cleared the temples, and God had to live there, but they disregarded him before. And Hezekiah again relit the lights of the temple, and God was so pleased with him. It's because of the idol worship, altars, all of those things. And he just cleaned those things, and he fixed up all of the, repaired the temples. It wasn't as good as the Solomon temple and decorated like that, but he cleaned it up, and that was King Hezekiah. And we can look at this at 2 Chronicles 29:7 and the following. And look, and the king of Assyria, he took all of the treasures. The king Ahaz gave him all of the treasures of the temple. And there were there were pillars in the temple, and they just gave it to the nation of Assyria. And so, after 16 years of reign, in that reign, there was not even the G in God in anybody. If you worshiped, they caught you and killed those people. It was just a wicked reign and government at that time of King Hezekiah's father for 16 years. And so, in today's terms, the different government workers and senators, they offered up their sons, their firstborns, to the god of Molech, because the king offered it up first. You have to get your firstborn, and second, third, fourth is okay, but they have to offer up their firstborn to the god of Molech. And it started with the king, and everyone else did. And this is in 2 Kings 28:24 and 25. And so, it has all of the specific contents, more than what I'm saying right now in those passages. And God sent 9 prophets, and they beat them, and they said, hey, you rascal, where's God? What are you talking about? And they just beat those prophets that came to them, punched them, and broke their teeth, and there was nothing that was going well. Everyone was so depraved. And do you think the people would like that? They would just turn away from you. Isn't that right? Look, if the president was doing a bad reign, they would say, why are they reigning so long? Why is this period so long? But if a good king is there, they would say 10 years is so short. And so, there's nothing that happened. Everyone's faces were crinkled, and everyone was just so fallen and just so despaired. And you meet your friends, and you talk to them by the river, and you laugh, and all of those things. But when you have a good time like that, 4 hours goes by so quick. And the nation is the same way. If you have a good king, time goes by so quick. And so God said, I cannot take this any longer. The northern Israel, he gave inspiration to him. And he said, go attack the South Judah king. And so, when they came in, when they were worshiping the idols, just listen. And we can see that there was 1.2 million troops that were killed in that war. And in one day they were killed. And they took an additional 2 million people. And the slaves are the people are slaves to the winner. And they lost. And so they became the slaves to the head. And they were taken like exile. Hey, what are you looking at? Hey, you don't have a husband anymore. All of those situations. And so the whole nation was just totally ruined. And so, correction, they killed, there was 120,000 people killed, and they took an additional 200,000 people that were taken into exile. Not 2 million, but 200,000. And so we can see that the king of Israel, he just didn't even deserve to go into a grave. And he was just fighting against God, and just resisting him. Just so evil. Where is this? 2 Chronicles 28, verses 6 through 20. In one day, 120,000 died, and 200,000 were taken captive. And so there has to be good government for the nation. And people are starving and the needy. They have to think of all of those things and take care of them. But look at this son, King Hezekiah. He kept the Passover. If you look at the 2 Chronicles, if you read those passages. And so after that king, there was not a king like that. There was good a king, and the people liked that so much. And I'm so thankful and rejoicing. I could starve and die. It doesn't matter. But there was great joy. There was great pleasure and enjoyment. And this is in 2 Chronicles 30, verse 26. And they enjoyed that peace during his time. And so, we could see in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verses 1 and 2. And there was revival in spiritual life of faith. And he put his heart and integrity. And he really turned the nation around. That's the king that he was. Now, number one, the crisis that Hezekiah came against. And we can see that Isaiah 38, in those days, what days was that? And Isaiah and Hezekiah prayed in the temple. The king of Assyria came in, but they prayed. And they killed all of the enemies of the enemy. And so we could see that there was a vast army that just had been killed by the angels came down, and they just twisted the necks of the people and just killed them. And the Israelites, they didn't even need any weapons, and they were all corpses. They were all dead. And we can see that 180,000 people, those who were equipped and armed, and we can see that the vast army that they had, all of their artillery or the weapons that they had, but they just looted them in one day. They could take all of that, and they did. And they had all of the food that they looted from them. And this is in 2 Kings chapter 20. And so they killed 180,000 people. And in that time, and Hezekiah was going to die because of the sickness. And so the joy was just a moment, a flash. And when we look at 2 Chronicles, it says, in those days, Hezekiah became mortally ill. Isaiah the prophet and King Hezekiah, they prayed in the temple. And Salem was the king of Assyria. And hey, I'm going to feed you the urine and poop water. Hey, what if Kim Il-sung, what's his son's name? Kim Jong-il. What if he came and he told the people of Korea, hey, if you don't help us, hey, you're going to drink my urine, you're going to drink my poop water. You better watch out. What if he said that to us? And everyone would just be so trembling in fear. The South Korea just has like a knife. And if, for example, the North Koreans have guns, and no matter how good a knife is, hey, one shot from a bullet, you're dead in the head. Isn't that right? And so, hey, it's like, hey, your death sentence is here. And they said, hey, we have the nuclear weapons, that kind of threat. What kind of weapons do we have? And so in the Korean War, the people were starving, and they couldn't eat much except like flour and so forth. But those people up there, they were like a very elite nation, and people were well fed. And so we can see that many people in the troops of Korea died. We can see that during that war, there were many casualties because of the attack. But these days, the students get taught that the South Korea invaded North Korea first. And Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-il, the enemy is America, they say, instead of the North Koreans. And when it says that you shouldn't forget the grace to even have one glass of cold water in the Bible, but you have to learn how to be thankful. Have you ever seen a financial revival when communists took over? We're living well today. Our ancestors, our forefathers, they suffered. They couldn't eat and couldn't wear clothes. And they only have just like a little, not even food. And they lived in these rough circumstances. And your parents all lived in that harsh environment. But today, to be able to eat a meal, like, can you just put that away, or throw that away? I just can't understand that. A person, if they do not know grace, they are nothing more than a beast. If you receive money, how great is that? In June 25th, this was not monsoon season, but for 1 week, there was great rain, and the soldiers of Korea, and Saturday they all left their work, and there was only a few people in the army base, and so we could see that they started to be attacked by all of the tanks of. They had the good advanced tanks from Soviet Union, and they started to barge in. And Korea didn't have a tank, not even one tank. They didn't have those big artilleries. Where were those things? And in every divisions, they had, in North Korea they had the weapons, but we could see that they came in and attacked and barged in. Did the soldiers eat well at that time? And their clothes, they didn't have any technology for coloring clothes. And if it rained, all of the ink would bleed out. And lieutenants and so forth, second lieutenants, they had little badges for themselves to show their rank. But if there's rain or if there's fog, those would just all bleed out. That's just nothing. And so, what's your rank? They can't even tell each other's rank because the rank would bleed out of their uniform. That's how bad it was. Hey, who are you? Tell me who. Do this for me. What's your rank? But they didn't run away. And so a lot of the soldiers, they really were so faithful. All of those people kept the nation. And at that time, ice cream or bread, those things weren't even existing. They just would take rice and they would bring it from a large distance. Sometimes they would get killed on the way from explosions, and they would make a little fire, and they would it was frozen, and they would heat that up. There were side dishes. They just had a little salt, and that was it. And they would put that in the water and melt the salt, and all of that burnt layers would come off, and that's how they were that's how they ate and how faithful they were to the nation. Now, well, how great is it now? And we can see how great it is, the luxury today. At that time, there was just only barley rice or just a little bit of meal, almost like wheat. And it's the same as the time of King Assyria, and then the people was just starving to death. Now God saw the heart of King Hezekiah, And seeing that, we can see that he was heading for death. But he prayed. He understood that. And when we look at Luke 18, Luke 18:1, it says, "Do not lose heart and pray continually." And 1 Thessalonians, it says, "Pray without ceasing." And Ephesians 6:18 is the same as well. It says, "Keep praying at all times." And into the church of Colossae, what he said, that when you pray, do not be complaining or murmuring, but with thanksgiving, always be praying. Apostle Paul told the church of Colossae. And so, God appointed death, but people, everyone has died,